All right, here we go. FDR, the New Deal. A little background on FDR. He was a Harvard grad, came from two very powerful families, the Delanos and the Roosevelts. We know his fifth cousin Teddy had been president. We've talked a great deal about him. He had served in New York state politics. He had served as Secretary of the Navy. He had run for vice president. He was a born politician. The Republicans are going to nominate Hoover in the election of 1932 without a lot of fanfare. Hoover is trying to run on the campaign sort of that old rugged individualism slogan, but also declaring that, toward the end of his administration, the government had tried to step in to alleviate the problems of the Great Depression. But Roosevelt is running on a campaign promise of a new deal to help pull the country out of the Depression. This will be a landslide victory for Roosevelt. He'll also run a Southern Democrat as his vice president, John Cactus Jack Garner, because he's trying to get all the Democrats in his camp. Much of the platform of the New Deal would appeal to the common American who is struggling during the Great Depression. He is going to promise to improve and restore American dignity. That's an important part of this, and one we'll wrap up with. Landslide victory. He did contract polio in the early 20s on a family vacation. He did try to keep his paralysis under wraps. However, it will ultimately lead to the campaign known as the March of Dimes, which is on the dime now. FDR. Yeah, easy way to remember that. He will also push for an end to Prohibition. And in his first year, Prohibition will be repealed with the 21st Amendment. Remember, the country had lost like $11 billion in tax revenue from the Prohibition. That's like on the low end. It's probably even higher than that. So here we have for a New Deal. Franklin D. Roosevelt, some jobless Americans, some children living in a Hooverville. This is the whole push for Roosevelt's New Deal. So what Roosevelt is promising is recovery, relief, and reform. On Inauguration Day, March 4th, 1933, Roosevelt will famously say, "The only thing we owe to fair is fear itself." That's my Roosevelt impression for the day. No more of that. The first thing that Roosevelt wants to fix is the banking problem. He is going to institute a nationwide bank shutdown called the bank holiday. He is going to get on the radio. He used the radio even more than Hoover or Coolidge. And he's going to use these fireside chats to explain to America his programs, but also to explain this is not just my problem, this is our problem as a nation. Hang in there with me, guys. Come on. What they're really trying to do is to prevent continued bank runs. They want banks to be able to hold on to deposits. He's promoting the 3 R's: recovery, relief, reform. This comes down to employment, banking, business, and internal improvements in the U.S. to help stimulate the economy. Congress will be dominated by the Democrats in this era. So what branch of government will be the thorn in his side? If it's not Congress, it's got to be... Nope, I'll wait. What branch of government would cause it? He is the executive. Judicial. Thank you. The Supreme Court. The judiciary. Did somebody say that over there?
Oh.
Okay, the Supreme Court will be the thorn in the side on a lot of these programs because a lot of people are critical. It's kind of a try anything type of mentality for Roosevelt in the first 100 days. His first 100 days is going to be insanely active, productive, I guess, if in the eye of the beholder. We haven't seen government intervention like this. Obviously, we saw it in the progressive era. But we don't see government intervention like this that rapidly since the American Civil War and the Lincoln administration. Do keep in mind, a lot of these programs were reboots of programs that had been instituted in Europe following World War I. Love this card. Well, the top right is a fireside chat. The bottom right here, this is great. It's got Roosevelt as the doctor, Congress as the nurse, and a sick Uncle Sam here. And all these medicine bottles are New Deal programs. Questions up to this point? All right. I am merely scratching the surface on the New Deal programs. I'm going to talk about the main ones. But I have provided in this lesson a list of all of them for you if you want to take the opportunity to check out everything that was done in the first and second New Deal. The first New Deal was 33 to 35. The second New Deal is 35 to the start of World War II. So the Emergency Banking Relief Act of 1933 put into effect the banking holiday to try to stabilize the American banking system. In the first 100 days, they're going to pass the Glass-Steagall Act. One of the guys involved here, E.C. Glass, who was from Lynchburg, Virginia. This will lead to the establishment of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which will insure deposits up to $5,000. What are they today? Econ students, how much are your deposits insured up to? Very good. $250,000. Well done. Excellent. All right. That makes up for the Supreme Court thing. Moving on. That will put faith in banking. FDR is going to move to Keynesian economics. Econ students, if you're out there, have you ever heard of John Maynard Keynes before? British economist. This is when America will move off the gold standard and move toward backing the money with commodities and the deficit. This is a little dangerous and tricky because what this is called is pump priming. This is the use of inflationary tactics. Why is it dangerous to potentially use inflation to stimulate the economy? It could go off the rails because you print too much money, and then that could potentially and dramatically impact the value of your dollar. So this is a short-term thing. This is widely criticized. Two programs that are important here. Hang in here. Hang with me. The Works Progress Administration and the Public Works Administration. These two organizations are going to put 8.5 million people to work. But I do want everybody to understand they were expensive. And they were almost always over budget. However, there are numerous legacies that are left behind. Hospitals, schools, bridges, roads, Mount Rushmore, the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Has anybody ever been to San Antonio before? Nobody's been? The Riverwalk in San Antonio. The list goes on and on and on. I always give a good example. How many functioning bridges do you think there were in the state of Louisiana that passed code prior to this public works project? 1, 2, those are good guesses. 3. 3 bridges passcode in the state of the entire state. It's insanity. All right. So these actually left a good legacy, but they were wildly expensive. The Agricultural Adjustment Administration is one of the most controversial. I want you all to hang in here with me because I'm going to ask you a question. The AAA basically allowed the government to tell farmers what they were going to grow, when they were going to grow it, what they weren't going to grow, and regulated crop rotation, regulated surpluses, regulated distribution, everything. Why would the Supreme Court decide that that was unconstitutional? What does that interfere with?
Personal freedoms.
Good. The free market economy and personal freedoms. This is actually, there was already cases that had precedent for this, but it's going to be the Butler case that will ultimately bring on an end to the AAA. This won't be the last one to be found unconstitutional. The FDIC, established for unsound banking, the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, established for illegal investment practices and to regulate Wall Street. So, welcome. Come on in.
Hey, Joey.
All right. All right. So, New Deal programs continue. Welcome back, Junior Marshals. Check it out. Organized labor absolutely loved Roosevelt because Roosevelt's going to pass numerous acts to support organized labor. But there is going to be one that becomes very problematic. The National Recovery Administration, the NRA, not to be confused with the National Rifle Association. This basically put the same sort of guidelines that the AAA had on corporations. So the government would assist industry labor and improve unemployment by determining the amount of goods that are produced by a particular industry. Again, same thing as before. Why does that violate? Why is that unconstitutional? What does it go against? Personal freedoms and a free market economy. Okay? Social Security Act. Wildly controversial. And I'm going to talk more about this as we move forward. Any idea how long Social Security was supposed to last? Amount of years. Who? Somebody say their name? How many years was this supposed to last? 50 years is a good guess. Less.
25.
10. It's only supposed to last 10 years. Guys, we're coming up on 100 years. Here's why. Check it out. The first group of people to pay into Social Security, where will they be within 10 years? What event? What event will these young Americans eat? No. No way. World War II. They're paying for the retirement fund for the elderly. They're paying for orphan children and widowed women and widower men. Once they get out of World War II, are you going to tell the greatest generation, sorry, Social Security program's over? No way. Next step. What do the greatest generation have a lot of?
Kids.
A lot of kids. Some of them have debt, actually less than you would think. It's their kids that carry a lot of debt. The baby boomers. The boomers come about. They're a massive generation. Those boomers can now cover their Social Security. Then comes my generation. What am I?
Gen X.
I'm a Gen Xer. There's less of us. Don't boo me. We're a salty generation. You know, of course you do. You live with Gen Xers. so we were like free-range chickens.
Oh.
And cousins were like packs of wolves. It was nuts. So there are less of us. You see the problem with Social Security? There's a lot. There's a fewer. There's a lot smaller. And then you guys, right? You're a larger generation. Keep an eye on Social Security. Why does no presidential candidate ever want to mess with Social Security?
So let's get the young people.
But also,
You want it?
old people vote.
They do, yeah.
Right. And old people don't want to lose their Social Security. No matter if they were the greatest generation or the boomers or would-be Xers that'll be elderly. Not quite yet. Not quite yet. But, see where I'm going with this? There's a lot of controversy that surrounds it. Civilian Conservation Corps establishes our state parks. Shameless plug for my hometown. Who's been to Dalton State Park before? Yeah. Everybody should visit. It's beautiful. It's amazing. That's the CCC. How many people have been to Pocahontas? Probably everybody. That's where the CCC Museum is located. Interestingly enough, guess who operated the CCC? Anybody want to take a wild guess? Who operated the CCC? The Army. This is going to be training ground for future World War II soldiers. All right? Tennessee Valley Authority established the hydroelectricity and dams in the Tennessee River Valley, which had been proposed under Hoover but carried out by Roosevelt. Remember, the New Deal is in two phases. Phase 1, 33 to 35. Phase 2, 35 to World War II. Guys, I'm not going through every single one of these, but what I've provided for you here on this slide and here, that's every New Deal program. We're just scratching the surface on them. I don't need to get into every single one. Have you noticed that we've called these programs by acronyms? WPA, PWA, CCC, FDIC. They called this the alphabet soup agencies. But remember, not all of them make it. So what's happening in this cartoon criticizing Roosevelt and his programs? What are those children that represent programs, what are they doing? Ring around the rosy. And what will eventually happen? They'll all fall down. Very good. Nice job. I love this one on the right. This is me. This is my dad, who's happily retired. He earns it. Because I am on the grid, right? How many of you all out there have jobs? Right? You're on the grid. Yeah? How many of you are paying taxes? You're on the grid. Have you ever noticed on your stub, electronic or in paper, the part taken out for Social Security? You're paying into it. It's like a carrot at the end of the stick. Unless it runs out for us. Bum, bum, bum. We'll see. All right. So, FDR will win re-election in a landslide. This is one of the most lopsided elections in electoral college history. FDR wins in the election in 1936, 523 electoral votes to just 8 for Alfred Landon. Why does FDR win re-election? Any ideas? Because he's appealing to who? The common person. The common people, or the common person, did not feel like he had given up on them. Even though all these New Deal programs weren't working, some of them were, and it's a restoration of what? I already said it once before. A restoration of dignity, okay? But, as I said before, I'm going to give you guys another shot. What branch of government is the thorn in the side?
Oh, the judicial.
Very good. The judicial. Supreme Court. They're the ones striking down these programs. So Roosevelt does something. Let's knock him down a peg a little bit, because we've been very kind to Roosevelt thus far. Roosevelt is going to hatch a plan to pack the Supreme Court. It's called the court packing scandal, or the court packing scheme. Roosevelt proposes that for every justice that is 70 or over, he should be able to add one justice per elderly justice. That would give Roosevelt the ability to add 6 justices to the Supreme Court, which means the court would go from 9 to 15. Even for the Democrats, even the biggest Roosevelt supporters, this was an overreach. Kind of looked like a bit of a dictator. Also, if this went through, who is he going, or I just gave away that. Who's going to get to choose those justices? Him, right? So this doesn't end up working out. The court packing scandal all falls apart. It's foiled. This is a really awesome cartoon that shows Roosevelt pitching the idea of the court packing plan. You have the justices here on the bench, and you have 6 Roosevelts in the background. Questions up to this point? As previously mentioned, Roosevelt was all about supporting labor, and he knew that the labor unions needed to have concessions, not just for politics, but also for production. So once the NRA is found unconstitutional, the Wagner Act is passed, which basically establishes the National Labor Relations, or it's established through the National Labor Relations Act. This is going to give labor unions the ability to organize and to collectively bargain. Here's the thing, and I want everybody to pay close attention to this. Somebody earlier said, wait a minute, didn't unions already have those rights? They did. In fact, some of those union rights had been provided by his 5th cousin, Teddy. But between the period of the progressive era to now, there had been a lot of deregulation under Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. So this is going to be a huge victory, and it's also going to lead to the emergence of a real, guys, thank you. It's going to lead to the emergence, of a really powerful union in American history. And that is going to be the Committee for Industrial Organization, the CIO. Have you all ever heard of this group before? They were led by John L. Lewis. They were born out of the American Federation of Labor. Remember that? Founded by Samuel who? Funky name. Starts with a G. Gompers. Very good. Prior to World War II, the CIO and the AFL actually merged and came together to become a really powerful, skilled union. Eventually, they'll splinter. And then after the war in 1955, they come back together. They're still around to this day. One really violent labor uprising that involved this group was the Memorial Day Massacre of 1937 that pitted strikers in South Chicago against the Chicago Police Department. This is not the first time we've talked about labor uprisings in Chicago, but here we are again. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act came about. This is better known as the Wages and Hours Bill. This is why we have minimum wage. This is the reason that we have excess hours of work. What happens if you go over your exceeded hours? You're paid overtime. At this period of time, the age for a work permit was 16. What is it now? 14. Okay, 14. Did anybody get permits out there? Nice, cool. Okay, so Roosevelt did enjoy a lot of support from the unions. This is the Memorial Day Massacre of 1937 in Chicago. New visibility for women in the era of Roosevelt and the New Deal. The ladies have the ballot. Women took on new roles in society. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, humanitarian, philanthropist, she sort of sets the course for first ladies in modern American history in the 20th and 21st century. She's a crusader for education reform, social welfare, and women's rights. She also goes on to become a leading advocate for civil rights, especially during World War II. She's going to push for African American men and women to have more equal rights in the war effort. And ultimately, in the post-war era, Truman will desegregate the military. Frances Perkins, first woman on the presidential cabinet, served as Secretary of Labor, instrumental in pushing for the Fair Labor Standards Act. Mary McLeod Bethune, she is going to head the Office of Minority Affairs in the National Youth Administration. She led the Black Cabinet, group of African American advisors to Roosevelt, and she'll go on to become one of the founders of Bethune-Cookman University. It's an HBCU down in Daytona, Florida. Anthropologist Ruth Benedict helped develop culture and personality movement for women. Her student, Margaret Mead, published Coming of Age in Samoa. These two PhDs from Columbia are going to be instrumental in the feminist movement of post-World War II. Pearl S. Buck, a little bit of local flavor. She's from outside of Gap Mills, West Virginia. She is going to win the Pulitzer Prize-winning and Nobel Prize-winning book for literature, The Good Earth, inspired by her and her family's time as missionaries in China. So we have Eleanor Roosevelt. There's Frances Perkins, always donning a stylish hat. And Mary McLeod Bethune. All right, so we wrap up with the legacy of the first and second New Deal. Roosevelt's first term did not allow for the Depression to disappear, but unemployment dramatically dropped by 10%. World War II ultimately took care of the unemployment problem. In 1937, there was a Roosevelt recession, a sharp recession that led to a lot of criticism, but there will be a rebound. Keynesian economics, as we previously mentioned, inflationary style economics, pump priming, highly controversial, heavily criticized in the era. But by the time we get into World War II, that'll be a thing of the past. And by the time we get out of World War II, after the Bretton Woods Conference, America goes back on the gold standard. Those of the New Deal condemn the waste in many programs, citing that nothing had been accomplished. Do keep in mind, as I mentioned before, from the start of the New Deal to the start of World War II in Europe, the nation's debt doubled. So from just under 20 million to just over 40 million. However, This is where we wrap things up. It took World War II to really solve the unemployment problem. 16 million people enlisted in the armed forces, 17 million people went to work. All of my grandparents, my grandmother was a WOW, see her on the wall. My grandfather served in the Pacific. My great uncles and my great aunts, all of them served the war effort in some capacity. Everybody was put to work. How low does unemployment get during the war? Any guesses? Less than 3% unemployment during World War II. So, but the war also created a heavier debt than before. Champions of the New Deal claimed that it alleviated the worst problems of the Depression and that it had created relief, reform, and did so without, and recovery without a revolution. Again, a restoration of, help me out, dignity. Hope, also good. A restoration of dignity. Hope is good too. Historians still argue about the legacy of the New Deal. Historians still pick apart the Roosevelt era. Some would even argue that all of these social programs helped kickstart the free market enterprise. The tycoons couldn't stand it, but that was to be expected. The legacy of the New Deal will be carried on into World War II, but the legacy of the New Deal stays with us. If you enjoy a state park, if you enjoy a national park, if you enjoy that your money's safe in a bank, who has bank accounts? Hey, has anyone run to the bank to pull all their money out of fear that the bank will collapse? No. These are legacies that have stayed with us. Okay, questions for me? All right, awesome. That is all I've got. I do want to share one quick thing with you guys.